Hi, I'm Rigger. This is You Are Right, and today we're taking a closer look at our latest Mystery Woman for Volume 9. Now, full disclosure, this video started out as a quick, I think I found a clue to who this is. And as you can see, it worked out a lot bigger and things went a lot deeper. So this video became something else. So this video kinda consists of two parts, or at least it builds up to the main part. In the first part, we'll discuss just what we can make of the image of our new mystery lady, and then we'll cover the person's identity later, because some of the things we go around and cover in the beginning will help us with the later thing. But there's no time like the present, so let's dive in. First off, I need to call myself out for making a kind of small mistake or assumption when I initially went over the teaser. It's relating these two images. They're different. I mean, obviously they're different, but what I mean is I said these two images could be related. Like they're both visions of the future, related to each other. But I made the same mistake a lot of people do, which is close things being related just because they're shown near each other or in the same teaser, when they could be totally different. And obviously the thing that draws the eye is how overly rendered the people are, how they're in a much more almost realistic style compared to the normal show. But that's entirely wrong. They aren't necessarily alongside each other at all, and the big giveaway is the fire. They're not like in the same scene or related, the two fires are quite different. And yes, we really are going that deep, if not way deeper very soon. So perhaps these two images are shown alongside each other, but the image of the Jean Knight, we'll call him, is surrounded by flickering flames. You can see the top of them, they're all around him. Almost metaphorical. But the warrior woman is in front of erupting flames like a scene. Or look, perhaps the Jean Knight is in like a flaming house and there's just fire licking around him. But the woman's fire is very, very different. The situation is quite different. The way it's animated is very different. It's an eruption of flame in front of them. So whatever the two scenarios are, they are not the same. Both may be metaphorical, although the Jean one seems more likely to be metaphorical. Again, we're just calling him Jean Knight because he's so close. In fact, it more reminds me of the metaphorical imaging we saw in the opening to Volume 8. Whereas this woman may in fact be in front of an actual explosion of fire, or it may be a different metaphor. But the point is they aren't showing the same thing. So even if this is a vision of Jean in the future, we shouldn't assume that this other person is also a vision of something in the future. But we're going to go more than just metaphorical imagery here. I just wanted to start with that. What I really wanted to do though, let's start picking apart this image. So first off, obviously the lighting on this makes it very hard to pick apart the details, which is on purpose. It's why they use this shot. It's very hard to see things, but we're going to try our best. To start with, I wanted to pick apart the stuff on her back before we move into the rest of the image in general, the actual figure. Just sort of to get them out of the way, we'll sort of work from the closest thing to us in. So to start with, I did my best to trace the major lines on this image. I turned the opacity down a little bit to try and find some hidden lines, and just to make it easier to pick apart, which looks like this. Now obviously without shadowing and color under it, it doesn't look like anything, and there's lines that get lost in black, but it was just to try and help with what we might be looking at. First off is this branch. It looks very much like the handle to a weapon, an ornate handle. So tracing it and working down, I think it might be a sword. There's some very, very dark lines here that could even be like mistakes in the image because they're so hard to see. So I have no idea if they're actually there or if you'll even be able to see it on YouTube in the colored version, and I even could be imagining it. But tracing those lines, this is what I got. And if you isolate that image and then extend those lines just to their natural conclusion, you get this. So it seems like a sword. However, I actually think this isn't the actual shape. If it is like a sword, it's probably something more like a dueling saber, like this. It probably has a different shape to it. In fact, the edge could be on the other side. It's hard to tell, but it's just an assumption, and I wanted to get rid of this branch shape to look more at the character. So I just wanted to say we have this, maybe. Or it could just be a handle. Perhaps there is no blade, and I'm seeing things. Perhaps it's an aura blade, or perhaps it's not a sword, it's some other kind of weapon. But that's what I saw. So taking that away, and then completing the lines left over, you get something like this. And this, I admit, I can't totally figure out what this is, and kind of no one can. See, this almost feels like a back piece of armor or something, or even perhaps a shield. Everyone is distracted by the spine, but there's almost no way this is the actual spine of this person, like if it's a Grimm being with an exposed spine. Because if you look closely at the image, look at the top, you see this depth here? There is a depth between the edge and the person's back. It sticks off their back in a hard line. It's thick, and past that, you can see like leather strapping beside the neck and going over the shoulder. So perhaps it is armor strapped to the back. The only part I can't figure out at all is on this side over here. You see how the line on the bottom part, perhaps the clothes seems to go over it? But that wouldn't make sense. That would mean the fabric goes around the back of this person and over the top of this bulky shape. which makes no sense, unless it weirdly connects just under it, which also kind of makes no sense, like a lower back corset thing that sits under this huge plate. I can't make sense of that. I think perhaps it's deceptive with how the arm is positioned and there's these armor pieces on the arm. I have two guesses. One is that it's a piece of back armor, like I said. The weirdest version of that is like a metal plate fused and the actual spine dips in and out, but I don't think so. I think I do know what it is. Hear me out. I think it is a shield. It is a shield stored on their back, which could go with that sword. So look, it has a depth to it. Again, it's thick. It's dark in tone. It could be a metal, but perhaps it also could be a wood, like the handle of that sword if they sort of go together. Or made to look that way, or dark stained. But basically, if you look at it, it kind of looks like a human heart, but it's also kind of almost a kite shape of a shield. And zooming in, we can learn from the shadow on the spine that runs up and down this thing that it kind of dips in. You can see how the top and the bottom, you can see to the underside of the vertebra. You see how you can see that edge that is showing the thickness of the vertebrae pieces. You can see that at the top and the bottom, but not the middle. And the shadowing there kind of seems to indicate the same thing, that the spine bends in. So it's on top of the, let's say, shield, and then it dips into a gap and back out and connects at the bottom again. Like the middle is falling back into a divot. And again, if you go to the top right of this image, you can see, again, it goes over the shoulder a bit, like it's higher than this person's shoulder, and there's a hard line and it's thick again. It's definitely some kind of plate. So it's definitely some big object. But also on the back, there's this weird double line that are reflecting here, like almost as there's etched lines into it. So hear me out. If you pull away everything else and just trace those lines in and sort of assume some of the bits you can't totally see, you're like, okay, maybe that spine is there to scare your enemy, like a horrible thing to have on the outside of your shield to intimidate people, but I actually don't think so. If you color it, my actual guess is this. I think the spine and the double lines further over form two straps on the back of a shield. If you look at how a shield connects to your arm, it's usually with two straps, a big one for the forearm and a small one for your hand. I think that's exactly what this is. The spine is dipping because the back of the shield is concave, for an arm to fit underneath it and grab this front strap with a hand. As to why it has to be a spine, or where that spine come from, or what type of spine it is, your guess is as good as mine. But that's what it looks like to me taking in all the evidence. Either way, taking that away too, then the person's back could say perhaps look like this, with strapping. Or perhaps it's more like a leather vest. I'm not going to draw all the options, it was just to visualize what could be under that plate. But now, those accessories are out of the way, so let's look closer. Honestly, the head is a beast on its own, so we're going to do that later. We'll do everything else first. Starting low, it looks like there may be a skirt here. There's these two highlighted lines that could be the edge of pleating on a skirt. That's just a guess. We have no idea. Here there's a hard line that there's clearly a belt, or it looks like a belt, where the fabric above tucks in. There's also these hip things. Now it's also a super micro detail, but there's this super tiny gap down at the bottom here of this image. And from that, I think I can tell that these hip things are not solid. They're not connected to the legs. They're perhaps hanging over this skirt or whatever's on the lower body. They're more like a fabric or something hanging, because you can see through to the front in perhaps where it's moving. Torn up edges along here perhaps and frayed trim, but what this reminds me of most is Raven. You know these hip things, whatever these are? Or perhaps a variation of this with the hip and thigh-like armor in a samurai style, something like that perhaps. And this person may have a sword and those hip things and a skirt, but I don't actually think this is Raven. It could be. Outside guess. Like a backup guess is Raven, but I don't think so. But it definitely reminds me of some of that styling. Moving up to this shoulder, there's another edge here, so perhaps that could be a vest or strapping. And then moving to the shoulders, they both appear armored, though in different styles. And the arms themselves seem to be encased in metal. Or are they? This is metal, or very much seems to be, but it seems to be bound together with bandaging, so it's not very well held together, and it's all square. Proportions in RWBY aren't always perfect, and small girls in big armor or small girls with big weapons is definitely a thing. But it feels unlikely almost a full arm could fit in here, unless it was being painfully squashed square. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe my eye's off, and maybe it's perspective. So perhaps it's an arm covered in metal, or perhaps are we thinking robot arms, perhaps? But that's weird. Let's investigate further. Moving down on both sides, they have these huge round forearm pieces. They're massive, and not only are they big, but absolutely part of them are at least machined. If you zoom way in, you get this. That is a screw hole or something with a thread in it, somewhere a bolt can go. So some kind of machine made this, or someone made this to interact with some kind of bolt. Something could be bolted to it, or it could be bolted to something. How mysterious. Presumably, it's the same on the other side, we can only guess though, just more random plating and strapping on that arm. There's also this weird piece, perhaps from wrapping or something, trailing off to the side. You can't tell from behind what it is, but perhaps it's just for stylization. But there's also more to learn here. The torso appears to perhaps have an asymmetrical chest plate on it in an armor, because past here, the rounded shoulder piece, we see this almost solid spikes up from the front. But there's a little hole in it, so perhaps it's more of a decorative design, like flames or like wood. This also continues way down the bottom of the left side. See at the bottom here, there's another piece sticking out in front. Another spike with a small hole in it from this front piece, whatever it is. Moving back up to the top, the last thing before we tackle this head is the back of the neck. There's these two silver square pieces on the side, and that makes me think perhaps there's a wraparound plate guarding the throat. It's a piece to protect the front of the neck that wraps around that could be perhaps connected to that front plate. And with that down, we got this head to decipher. Okay, so line-wise it looks like this. Let's just go over it. As you can see, there's a lot of gap in the back here where things just get pure black. You can't see. First of all, there are like two pipes. They're either pipes or like decorative hair pieces of jewelry, like with hair inside jewelry tubes that are tied back. It's hard to tell, but there's these clear lines on them going across them, like piping or tubes or something. I don't know what those are. And there's another thing here. That one up top isn't really a tube. It's got like fracturing lines on it, like it's crumbling, like it's old rock or something. And it's similar on the other side over on this side of the head. That's confusing. Is it just weird shadowing? It's hard to tell. Just like up top, there's this light red piece, like fabric or something, that seems to be being tied down under these black tubes that are more tubular, they're more uniform than you would think a piece of hair would be, just like this big loop above them. It's also very uniform. It could be hair, but it's very weird to put that in the middle of a character's head. It's very thin, which makes me think perhaps it is some kind of tube or some wrap that goes over the head and one is loose. It's hard to tell, which makes you think perhaps they all head towards this middle that we can't make out. It's quite strange. Another one that isn't totally clear is this piece. I'm assuming is perhaps one of the loose bits of hair behind the ear hanging down still. It's really hard to tell, it's just a shadow on one side. There's no other loose hair here, but that perhaps is, unless it's something else hanging down. But what does seem clearer is this hair on the back. It's turned up to make this sort of hair bulb on the back, as if the hair was tied back, hanging down behind the neck, and then flipped up again onto the back of the head and then held in place with some kind of band or something running around the back of the head. So that creates this bulb-like shape on the back, and that's supported by this tiny little red triangle here, this little tip poking out from perhaps whatever the thing is across the back of the head that's holding the hair up. That's further supported by the rest of the shape of the hair. Up top it's bulbing out, you can see like a pillowy shape, but it's flat on the sides. So perhaps there is a wide band pressing the hair down and compressing it around the back of the head and the sides. Again, this tube down here is weird because it seems like this all leads to just the base of the hair. So it doesn't go anywhere, it doesn't seem like it wraps all the way under the head, under the chin and round to the front. Unless it's simply the way the head is, we can't quite see it. I can't make total sense of that. The chain, and what it's attached to is a decent question, but actually there's a micro detail here. If you look past the chain, just look through it just here, you can see there's a little shadow in front of it. There's something in front of the chain in front of the face. Lastly is the most important detail in this entire thing, and it's this little red part here. You see this red part? This is different. Look at all the other red parts. They're softer, they're flatter. All these other red parts are like hair or fabric. This red part is not. It's more vibrant. It's in the middle, and it has a vibrant color red to it, and it has a shine on it. It's a material that's more reflective. It's like a ribbon. It's as if this hair was held together by a red ribbon originally at the back here to be held back. That's what these ends also look like, these long strands here. Only one of them actually looks red in the shadowing and shading we got, but if you presume that they're both from the ribbon, and why wouldn't you, they look like it, and if you look at the ends, they don't look like natural hair shapes, then again, it holds that there might be this red ribbon on the back of the head that is then covered by this band around the hair. As if it was holding the hair together at the back before the band was put around the head and the hair was flipped up under it. Putting all that evidence together, you get this as to what I think the back of the head mostly looks like, is my presumption. And whether or not you totally agree with me that's how the head is or not, what really gives this whole thing away is this red ribbon here. This hanging down red ribbon and this clearly different red piece on the back. Because now we somewhat move on, because I am almost certain I know who this is. Because there is one character who this fits perfectly for. We have seen this exact thing once before. There is one specific person who has exactly this, and there's more matches on this than you would think. It's the head that gives it all away. It's almost certainly female, and first off, let's look at the hair shape. It's pulled back from the front over the head. The hair appears to be dark, but there's certainly red in the hair, be that fabric or color, it's hard to tell. The hair seems to be held back by this red ribbon, this all-important red ribbon. Look, I compared this to Raven, and I guess you could say it's Raven, it's dark hair, and she has red, or it could be a vision of RWBY from the future, which is what I said it could be. It certainly could be. Black and red hair with a red ribbon tying it back. But there is one better. For the first time ever, I am declaring an actual guess for this person. For real. This is actually not just a random guess, with evidence. Finally, this is Summer Rose. For real. Because there is only one person who matches all these specifics. Bam! Hello. Red ribbon. Holding the hair back from the front. All you need to do is take this hair hanging at the back, fold it up to the back of the head, put a band around it to hold it there. The red tip here would make sense as the red bits being swept up, and these red bits would be from the front of the hair, the bangs being swept back along the head and held in place. There's more. Remember this band around the head and something in front of the chain? There is definitely an object there. Wouldn't it make sense if this person's eyes were covered? If the band around the head was holding something to their face? Think Ryder from Fate, or perhaps even the Batman Who Laughs. But in general, there is this gap, and the thing that makes the most sense is this, and I can't make sense out of the tubes, but otherwise, this person has their eyes covered, and dark hair with red in it, and originally a red ribbon holding their hair back, which is even almost the correct length if you were to flip it up from the back of the head. I am almost certain this is Summer Rose for real. Legitimately, my real theory, real guess. This is a flashback maybe? This is happening now maybe? We have no context, whatever it may be. This is finally actually her. There is no other character who fits this perfectly. If we presume that she's had her eyes taken out, or for whatever reason she has her eyes covered, and if Salem has her, perhaps she has her eyes covered, because why wouldn't you? This all fits. But it doesn't stop there. Let's go further. Because that's the prediction bit you all came for, but I kept going. Because what I did next was attempted to create a guess at the front of this person. Now obviously it's a guess, I'm just working off the evidence we have from the back, and I'm not an artist, but I tried to flip it around, so check this out. This is what I ended up with. Obviously not well designed, it's not all perfect, it won't look like this exactly. And, are these Summer's weapons? I don't know. And I do know there's evidence in a DC comic, which is apparently canon, although people argue about how canon it's then become, that says that Yang tells RWBY that Summer uses a sword, but then Crow says later, no, she doesn't. However, he does then pick up sticks and say this is her weapon, or something like that. This could be her weapon. So maybe that leads into these tree weapons, who knows? Or maybe Crow was right and that wasn't her weapon, but maybe Summer gained these two weapons later. Because one of the reasons I thought this might be RWBY from the future is I have a second theory here, that I think there's a decent chance that these weapons are made from this tree. the Tree of Life, or Yggdrasil, or the Tum Tum Tree from Alice in Wonderland, if it's that, which perhaps could make this the Vorpal Sword, because they're in the same poem even though they're not said to come from the same thing, but it's so lacking with evidence, who knows. But if this tree is super powerful and tied to life itself, or the worlds itself, perhaps it could hurt Salem, or something. It's just sort of logicking it out. Perhaps a shield made from its timber can reflect magic, magical weapons. That's another actual guess that these weapons could be from that tree, whether it be RWBY or someone else got them. Perhaps Summer has been here before somehow, or had someone sent to get them, and somehow gained these weapons in an attempt to take down Salem. Which could answer the question, why did Summer think she could just take down Salem if she had any idea who she was? Or perhaps she wasn't an idiot who went into an unwinnable battle. Perhaps she had these weapons beforehand and brought them to fight Salem, but still lost in the end and was overwhelmed. She actually gave herself a chance with these crazy weapons. Why there is a spine, I have no idea. That could be something related to it. It could be the spine of something magical. I don't know. There's still big questions here. As you can see, I artificially shrunk this a little bit and drew a little further down so you can see the hands. Is it actually that Summer's arms are encased in here? Because I don't think it is. Or perhaps is this robot hands? I didn't colour this one because no, I don't really think it is. I just put robot hands on here with like claws. But these hands couldn't use those weapons. Unless it's also robot hands that are shrunk down to size with massive forearms for no reason, but if so, why have the massive forearm pieces? Okay, so I have an actual guess. The whole robot machine thing makes no sense. The only people who deal with robotics is Atlas, and this doesn't look like Atlas stuff. It's not sleek enough, and how would that work? How would Summer get to Atlas stuff, and wouldn't it be running on dust, and we don't see any dust and glowing? It's being held together with a bandage, it's shabbled together like plating. I doubt the robot hands would work, even if they were still there. So, if it's a human arm wouldn't fit, and robotics don't make sense, there is one more option. My actual guess, bam. Grimm arms. Now I know, we've seen half Grimm people for ages in fan art, and they're already doing that with Cinder, why would they do it again? But I think there's something to this. First of all, if you're Salem and you're fighting someone like this, cut off their arms. Great start of a plan. Get rid of their arms first, because, that's something they can use against you, and if you can control the Grimm bit, then, yeah. And also, not to mention, in a battle, this would make sense. Why would you wrap your arms in metal? Well, if they're Grimm arms, they can't be protected by aura, so why not armor? And if they are, like Grimm arms, Cinder's is very thin and skeletal-like, so presumably these would be similar. So you could put these big bits of metal around them to protect them, and they could be very strong, these arms, you have no idea. And that's actually my guess for perhaps why there's a chest plate at all. Most huntsmen don't wear chest plates except for Jean. Perhaps a lot of this body is Grimm and can't be protected by aura. Or perhaps it's so one-sided off to the left here because it's there to protect the heart. I've got no evidence for this, but it would make sense to me that if this subject needs to survive and the Grimm to stay intact and is being alive, it has to at least protect the heart. So everything leans left because it's the most important part. Pure guess, no evidence for that. This is more menacing. Lesions on the face like the Hound, plus the black Gru crying motif from under the eye shield is pretty cool, and the white scarring. The Hound guy's hair didn't grow, so perhaps Summer's didn't grow either, it's still about the same length, if it's the modern day. I couldn't explain these cracked white bits in the hair, and it's true on the Hound design that the white bits don't go into his hair, but if they changed it up a little, perhaps just for the design, perhaps that's what these cracked white bits are. It's like the hair sort of decaying and dying in strands. I don't know, just a guess. Also, Salem's eye emblem on the eye mask isn't just a cool motif. I'd like to think perhaps it's something that allows her to see, like a spell or something. So you can do the whole blind swordsman thing, but with justification for why they can actually see you. Or perhaps it has Grimm senses and whatever, but the emblem there would still be cool. And perhaps this isn't an evil person, perhaps there is the idea that Summer is a failed experiment who's still alive and not evil. She can think and fight for herself, which is why the Hound, a later experiment, is still an original experiment, a new type, because he's much more covered and much more dominated by the Grimm. He can fight, but he also can't fight like a person, he fights beastily. Where, as Summer here, perhaps the attempt was to make a Grimm-infused huntress who could use her skills, still be a swordswoman, all those sort of things. Just speculation, but it'd add up, and perhaps it didn't work, Summer confided, or was too much of a handful, so later on she tried the Hound, which was more dominated by the Grimm attached to him, and is more of an animal, more just follows orders blindly, has less cognitive ability because that was an issue. The spirit, the consciousness was an issue in these earlier versions of whatever Summer is. All speculation, but it would add up and still make everything make sense. But there's even more questions here, there's more to this, because these chains, what's the deal? Well, this brings to mind something else, and not just the sound Hashira. Remember those bolt holes that are definitely in the back of those forearm pieces? This one? Why is that there? And why would perhaps Salem encapsulate Summer's arms in metal if she did it? Well, I present to you this. I don't know about you, but that'd be a pretty good way to keep someone restrained in my dungeon if I was Salem working on them or didn't want them escaping. This feels really likely to me. I mean, we've seen Salem can restrain people with magic, but she had to be there for that. Just wrapping them up in steel they can't break and bolting them to the wall is a pretty good way to deal with something you don't want escaping from your dungeon, that you don't have to concentrate on 24/7, if that's even possible with the magic stuff. As you can see, the more I worked on this all became more and more reasonable to me. But there's one thing I'd like to point out which is just hypothetical on top of all this. We also don't know Summer's semblance. If you were making this half-Grimm weapon, if you're Salem, perhaps also the idea is you want them not totally smothered like the Hound, because perhaps that way they can retain enough soul to use their semblance. Because, say, someone like Cinder, it seems they can use their semblance just fine, but perhaps if you were totally covered like the Hound, you couldn't. We also know that Grimm feeds on aura and stuff, so maybe even if you were enough to stay alive, you wouldn't be able to summon enough aura to create and use the semblance. But as it stands, we have no idea what Summer's semblance could be. And outside of the Shnees, as far as we've been told, semblances can be totally random, not necessarily even related at all between family members. Except for also with Neptune's family because they like to forget their own rules. But in general, that's what we've been told. So perhaps all this metal on them, even if it is their hands, if they're not Grimm arms, perhaps that's to stop Summer using her semblance, whatever it may be. We have no idea. So even if you don't like the Grimm arm thing, there could still be good reason for it, or just as a way to lock them to a wall. Semblance be damned, it's just a way to restrain them forever. Oh, and one more thing I wanted to add is there's actually another little hint that this might be Summer, and this one's gonna sound silly, but it makes sense, is the character has their back to the screen and slowly turns to their right. And that sounds so dumb, a character turning a certain direction. But the reason I think it's relevant is, okay, in the teaser it's only like 2 frames. The character goes like 2 frames or 3 frames over and they turn slightly to their right. But I think for a reveal, they purposely want to mirror this shot, where Summer turns to the right, round back to the camera. That, oh, reveal of the pretty face, and oh, it looks just like RWBY, and oh, it's the vision we've wanted to see. You mirror it, pretty much the same shot, and they turn, and it's, you know, freaky, and it's scary, and it's off-putting, and it's not what you wanted to see. And then, you know, everyone on Twitter can put them side by side and go, oh my god, they mirrored the shot. I actually think that despite it being tiny, there's a decent argument that that could be part of what they're trying to do here. Just wanted to point it out. So finally, I come to ask, is this perhaps what we're facing in the future? A Grimm-infected Summer, perhaps with even weapons from the tree itself? Or perhaps they're just the weapons that she had? Or is it perhaps not Grimm? Is it just looking like this and she has the eye shield there just to cover her missing eyes because perhaps Salem ripped them out? We don't know. Are these her weapons? We don't know. But the hair color matches. The hair tie matches. And it's not just random, she's the only character we've ever seen like that. The covering of the eyes would make sense. Even wearing a skirt matches. So much of this matches. However we're seeing this, I'm calling it this character is Summer Rose. I hope you appreciate the work that went into this one. And if you did, please leave a comment. Let me know your thoughts down below. Did I miss something? Am I correct? Am I wrong? Did you see something I didn't? And of course, subscribe if you want to see more. Until next time, my name is RWBY. I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope I did alright.